What's going on, guys? Welcome back. So in this video we're going to be doing a little bit of engine bay cleanup. There's quite a few things in this engine bay that I feel don't need to be here. Now, looking at photos online, I've seen a lot of really clean engine bays. A lot of welding has taken place, a lot of shaving has taken place, and this being a daily driven car, not a show car, I feel like that's going to be a little too excessive for me specifically, but some definite tucking is in order. So I'm going to go ahead and review some photos, get these fenders and fender liners taken off the car so I can better assess the inside and outside of the engine bay itself. And we'll see what we can tuck, what we can remove to better prepare ourselves for the inevitable removal of everything that is bolted down to scuff and paint this engine bay in preparation for the engine install. So I'm going to go ahead and get the camera set up and we'll get started. All right, so update time. The camera did shut off at 1 minute and 49 seconds during the time lapse, and I wasn't aware, so I continued working and it was not recording. What I was able to accomplish in that time, I got the entire wiring harness for the turn signals, indicators, headlights, and all that removed. I got the hood latch and the hood latch pull cable removed and separated from the car. I got the lower fog light assembly removed from the rad support as well. So the only thing left on the rad support is this little guy here, and all I got to do to get him out is remove these brackets here, and then loosen this and just pull this whole thing straight out of that hole there. So that'll be my next thing to do. I realized I could reverse mount all of the grounds and everything and run all of my headlight plugs on the outside here. So I'll start going through this harness at a later date and separating the wire so I just have as much free playing wire as possible to get to the headlights and everything else. I'm going to attempt to run all of these harness wires either through this lower rad support rail and pop them out where they need to be in hopes of trying to clean up some of that wiring on the front of the car. On this side, I did reverse mount the relays and all the grounds and started stripping the wiring harness apart on this side just to get more play and more access to the wiring itself. So what's left for me to do today and probably tomorrow, I'm going to get this bracket removed, get the solenoid and all the plugging for the solenoid relocated, mounted outside over here. I'll get all of the wiring harness pulled out and separated, and then get the ABS system pulled out and the motor mounts taken off and disconnected so I can clear up this whole space for sanding and paint preparation as well. All right, another quick update. I got a lot of the other stuff that was sitting around taken out. Motor mounts are gone. Some other stuff was disconnected back in here. I got the wheel sensor plugs removed out of both sides. I got the ABS unit disconnected, but have realized that I'm just not going to have enough space with it permanently mounted in the car to paint the way that I want to. So I'll get a hand pump and pump the fluid out of the brake booster reservoir, and then disconnect all the hard lines and remove this completely. So that way I have the space that I really want to sand and repaint and prep all this. But before I do any of that, I do want to continue working on the shaving and tucking process, and that finishes pretty much right now with this corner right here. Now, all of this was in that corner. It was ran through that hole, popped out right there. The relay was hooked to that screw. These banana plugs were plugged in right there to the cap, and all this wire was just kind of down in there, pinned down the grommets. And then this little plug here was through that grommet there and was hooked into the windshield wiper motor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to strip the loom here, get this wire and the banana plug wires separated from the relay, mount the relay to this wire bunch somewhere right here in this area to keep it out of the way nice and neat. And I'll take this plug and those plugs, run them back through this hole to that corner and pop them out right here, and then plug them in there, and then run the other plugs over here, and I can run them through these two little holes right there and plug them right back in. So I'm gonna go ahead and start working on that, see if I can get that cleaned up, and then once I get the distance I need for the cabling, I'll go ahead and re-loom this cable with the loom that I purchased, and then call this corner done, and then move on to something else. So I did get to make this a little easier on myself. I use this a lot in sewing, but I bought a brand new one. Figured a seam ripper would probably help me in cutting through this tape and this wire loom without having to actually, nick a wire in the process. So got this, it was like $1.50 on Amazon, so not too bad. And then to fix any of the wire loom once I tear it apart, I got a roll of weather resistant, oil resistant electrical tape, and I want to say it was like $4 or $5, but this is really good for engine bay stuff because the tape likes to stick to itself and it's a little more accustomed to high heat, so that's nice. And the last thing I picked up was a bag of split loom. The split loom is just indeed that. It's literally a wire loom that is nylon braided, so instead of it being plastic, it's nylon. It's very thin, and once the tube is wrapped around, the tube basically encompasses itself, and it creates a nice, secure, solid protective coating around the wires. So I'll probably use this to isolate the wiring to get it in through the hole, and then separate it from the relay. So now that I showed you that, I'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to use a lot of this stuff on pretty much anything that I've separated from the loom, to include all the headlight wiring I showed you earlier. But I'm not going to do all that until I mock the headlights and ensure that I have enough length to get all the plugs to line up correctly. So, we'll see. Alright, so everything went in nice and easy as I had hoped. The brake fluid reservoir cables did fit through those holes, so they will reach and everything is good there. They are routed up underneath the windshield motor bracket, so they should stay out of the way of everything that's functioning and moving inside here. And everything came up through this port and plugged in nice and easy. So that's all good. In regards to the relay, I mounted it a little higher up in here just so it had some stability when it was cinched down by the fender. And once everything was taped down and rerouted, I just pushed the excess cabling up into the port where it came out originally, and everything turned out nice and neat, so I can't complain with that. It's starting to get dark, so I'm gonna go ahead and call it a night and come back out and continue working again tomorrow. All right, so we're back at it again. Like I said yesterday, I was going to get this ABS system taken out completely. So to do that, I went ahead and went by Walmart and got a multi-use pump by Hypertough to transfer the brake fluid out of the reservoir into that little milk jug right over there. So I'm gonna go ahead and knock that out real fast and then see if I can get this ABS system disconnected and pulled from the car. you couldn't tell by the clothing changes throughout this video, this was a 2-week process for me. I'm not a mechanic, never claimed to be a mechanic, and this was time-consuming and honestly stressful. I've never done anything to this extent before, and what I initially planned for this video to be, which was a how-to, turned into a watch me hopefully not break anything. And luckily, I can say that that did happen. Nothing was broken, so I'm happy there. All the hard lines came out with the original kinks and bends with no additional new kinks and bends, so that's great. And everything that came out just needs to be cleaned and then reinstalled once the engine gets put in. So overall, super happy about that. A couple points of issue that I had, one of which being the fuse box. I had no idea how to remove this fuse box until I realized this cap came off, and once I noticed that, I unplugged everything and it was smooth sailing from there. This is going to go right back in place in the engine bay, so I'm not too concerned about the prep for it underneath. I would have liked to have removed the wiring, which brings me to issue number 2. The only way I can see to get this engine wiring out and into the cab is to take apart 75% of the underdash of the car. And since the interior is 100% complete, I don't want to do that. So I'm probably just going to bag that wiring up and paint around it somehow, and then hope for the best. Third issue was this big boy here for the brakes. I did not want to go through the hassle of trying to get that apart, because I did watch some videos on how to remove it, and I wasn't willing to put in that much effort either. And as you can see, it does need some paint, so I'll just tape off the areas that don't need painted, and I'll spray that as well. In regards to the hard lines here, for the ABS and the EVAP, all of the mounting brackets under the car were disconnected, so I have plenty of play that I should be able to pull these things around and paint behind them. I haven't been to the far back side of the car to see how they disconnect, if they disconnect from the actual gas tank. And if they do, I'll go ahead and remove them completely. But if not, that should be good. Because of how stressful this was, being my first time getting this involved in it, what I failed to do was to properly label any of the bolts as I remove them. So the extent of my organization skills for this project are literally bolts with small washers, bolts with large washers, and bolts with no washers. So I don't know how well that's going to work getting everything reinstalled, but luckily for me, all the bolts are the same size and thread pitch. They just vary in length, so as long as I use the proper size washer to bolt back down whatever's missing, it shouldn't be too big of an issue. I did find a motor mount or 2 that were broke that I need to replace, so that was also helpful in making sure that I get everything put back in that's fresh and not need replaced again later on down the road. So with that said, I have nothing else for this video, I don't believe. So I'm gonna go ahead and end this one here, and I'll start the engine bay prep and sanding and getting this thing ready for paint. So if you've been following along, thank you, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If this is your first time on the channel and you are not subscribed, I highly encourage that you do subscribe if you want to keep following along with the Prelude content and the Infinity content that will eventually come as I get further along with the Prelude. That said, go ahead and hit that like button, that bell notification, and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you on the next one.